Welcome back to the news at 10. Let's take you live now to New York, where President Muhammad Buhari is addressing the UN General Assembly.
And we will continue in our determined efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emission. At the center of Nigeria's climate action is our determination to implement the strategies and our intended nationally determined conditions, which will foster low-carbon economy and sustainable growth in building a climate-resilient society. We are creating public awareness through the integrated involvement of the private sector and civil society, and strengthening national institutions and mechanisms. The negative consequences of climate change have manifested in the drying up of our Lake Chad. The means of livelihood of an estimated 30 million inhabitants of the Lake Chad Basin spread across Cameroon, Chad, Niger, Nigeria are being severely threatened. The cost of replenishing the lake has been put at $14 billion US under a 5-year plan which should be accorded global attention. Nigeria also supports the African Union initiative on the Great Green Wall to hold the certification. In furtherance of our commitment to environmental sustainability, Nigeria has launched the clean-up of Ogoni land in Nigeria's Niger Delta, based on 2011 environmental assessment of the area by the United Nations Environment Programme. Multinational oil companies operating in the area will be required to live up to their corporate social responsibilities and contribute to the cleaning up of the environment degraded as a result of their activities and operations. We call on development partners and the multinationals to support our efforts through the Ogoni Land Restoration Fund. Mr. President, the 21st century has been marked by the rising insecurity unleashed by global terrorism and violent extremism, which constitute a real threat to the international community. With the global increase in the spate of terrorist attacks, there is now more than ever before international consensus and greater willingness to collaborate in combating this threat. Indeed, we are meeting at the time when our hosts, the American people, have just marked the 15th anniversary of the tragic and deadly terrorist attack on their soil. We in Nigeria, having been victims of terrorism ourselves, fully understand in the impact of 9/11 on the American Sashi and the families of the thousands of innocent victims whose lives were lost that day. I therefore reiterate the Nigerian government's and people's sympathies with the American people and prayers for the families of the victims that they may heal and find closure soon. We hope that justice will be done to the families of victims of 9/11, as indeed to the victims of terror everywhere, in conformity with the norms of international justice. As we seek justice for terror victims, the international community should avoid reacting in the heat of deep emotions of the moment by taking unilateral measures, legal or otherwise, that will have a negative and a disruptive impact on the international community's collective efforts to fight terrorism. We should not be distracted in our collective resolve to beat back terrorism in all its forms. As we confront terror, we must also commit to stopping the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, which nurture its spread. To this end, Nigeria urges member states that are yet to sign and ratify the Arms Trade Treaty to do so without further delay. Nigeria has made remarkable progress in our resolve to defeat Boko Haram, whose capacity to launch orchestrated attacks as a formed group has been severely degraded. In the last few months, their operations have been limited to sporadic use of improvised explosive devices against soft targets. Nigeria has continued to combat terrorism based on the established rules of engagement and in conformity with international best practices. I take this opportunity to reaffirm Nigeria's commitment to human rights norms and international humanitarian law in our efforts to counter terrorism and violent extremism. I also wish to restate the assurance that the federal government of Nigeria is employing all our judicial tools to investigate and treat reported cases of human rights violations. I commend the contribution of our neighbors, Benin Republic, Republic of Cameroon, Republic of Chad, and the Republic of Niger, whose combined efforts under the multinational Joint Task Force accomplished the present return of normalcy in areas hitherto occupied by Boko Haram. May I also thank our international partners, including France, the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, the United Nations, ECOWAS, the African Union, and many other multilateral and bilateral partners for their invaluable support. Our experience today is evidence that with determined international collaboration, terrorism can be defeated. Mr. President, the flow of refugees and migrants worldwide has attained alarming proportions. In this wise, Nigeria supports the ceasefire agreement brokered by the United States and Russia to end the atrocious tragedy of the Syrian civil war. Of particular concern to us in Nigeria is the plight of internally displaced persons arising from Boko Haram terrorism. We have taken concrete steps to address their humanitarian needs and to ensure that the necessary conditions are established to enable the voluntary return of the displaced persons to their places of abode in safety and dignity. Mr. President, at the same time, the Palestinian issue, despite years and years of international efforts, is no nearer to being resolved. Nigeria, in company with member states of the African Union, firmly support the two-state solution with Palestinian rights to statehood and conformity with numerous Security Council resolutions, beginning with Resolution 242 of 1967. Let me seize this opportunity to once again thank all United Nations and other aid agencies and development partners currently deployed in northeast Nigeria. I reaffirm Nigeria's commitment to collective action towards an effective global response to address the root causes of refugee flows worldwide. Mr. President, we acknowledge the importance of youth in national development and remain committed to harnessing the potential of the increasing youth bulge. We must take advantage of the numbers and creative energy of young people who are in the majority in Nigeria and in most other member states. Therefore, at the international level, we call for the establishment of a specialized United Nations agency for youth development to achieve this strategic objective. Nuclear security remains central to our quest for durable peace and security. This was why I participated in the 5th Nuclear Security Summit hosted by President Barack Obama in Washington in March 2016. Nigeria and the other peace-loving member states of the United Nations must continue to uphold the fundamental principles of nuclear disarmament, non-proliferation, and its peaceful uses. Mr. President, the United Nations should now redouble the long protracted effort for its reform to enable it to effectively address the challenges of our times. Nigeria therefore reiterates its call for the reform of the United Nations Security Council, in particular to reflect equitable and fair representation and greater transparency, legitimacy, and inclusiveness in its decision-making. Africa should be adequately represented on the United Nations Security Council in the permanent member category. In this regard, Nigeria stands ready to serve Africa and the world on a reformed Security Council to advance international peace and security. Mr. President, let me conclude by reaffirming Nigeria's abiding faith in the United Nations and in her capacity to support member states to deliver on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I thank you.
President Muhammad Buhari at the UN General Assembly addressing the 71st session. Next on the news at 10, a four-time African Footballer of the Year, Yaya Toure, announced his retirement from international football. I have more on that in sports news. Please stay with us.